guess today's purpose really is just kind of to get anybody who is interested in VHF, UHF sideband type of operation. This is kind of outside. This is outside of the FM realm. So typically when not typically, but I'll say like the go-to for most ham radio ops is that when you say VHF, they think, oh, 2-meter FM repeater. And yes, that is a portion of it, but you'll find out the more you discover VHF and UHF that is a very small portion of it, and that there's so much more that's out there. And once I got kind of introduced to this, to this realm, it changed everything for me, honestly, and I was immediately addicted. I belong to a VHF club up in New York, and they have a slew of people in there that have a lot of really good information and have really done a lot with VHF and UHF weak signal work for years. And so, I mean, there's everything from your sideband operation to moon bounce, weak signal work, EME stuff, which stands for Earth, Moon, Earth, satellite work, linear transponders versus FM transponders. It's just, and it's a completely different world, honestly, than HF. HF is very exciting for many reasons, but VHF is just as exciting for completely different reasons, and that's what I love about it. So, but it's very different from HF. You're going to have, you have your Yagis have much sharper beam width. When you talk about an HF beam, I've actually made contacts off the side of my beam, across the pond, no problem. You can't do that in VHF. VHF, you're talking about something like a 11-degree beam width, and the higher you get, the sharper it gets. So there's a lot of different things that are to be considered when you're talking about VHF, UHF. Propagation, for instance, is completely different. You're not using the same part of the atmosphere, and the same properties that give you HF propagation do not give you VHF propagation all the time. It may on 6 meters, but as soon as you start to get up into the higher bands, you're talking about tropospheric ducting, and for instance, you have things like MSK 144 that guys use, that ops use for meteor scatter. So as the meteors basically disintegrate into the to the ionosphere and everything, it actually creates a kind of a situation where you can actually bounce a digital signal off of that, and you get propagation from here to Kansas or Missouri, on 2 meters or 6 meters too. So there's a lot of different things to consider with different modes available. Things that aren't typically used on HF because of the bandwidth concerns. You have much higher bandwidth up in VHF and UHF, especially UHF. There's those things to consider, but I guess just to start it out, I guess we'll talk about propagation. Propagation. Let's see here. Actually, let's just start out with the tools, because if we start with the tools that I use with some of the things that I do, it'll kind of lead into these things. I think that's a better. Let's see here. Share my screen.
So the meteor scatter. It's funny because I've seen bits and pieces of the VHF sideband. All the EME and all the guys who have the two beams and they're tracking. I guess that's satellite work. I guess
that's satellite. Yep.
It just seems for me they always look really cool, but it just seemed like a lot to and of course then there's the expense of it too, thinking about how much to put
there's I will say this, that if you're going to do satellites, it's much easier to start out on FM satellites, because you don't have the Doppler shifts,
right.
You don't have to consider the Doppler shifts and things like that. So FM satellites, And I've even used, honestly, I've even used my sideband antennas for FM satellites, because it's just, you just, it's not that. I've even used my vertical omni for them too. You don't have as much issues with operating on them. I haven't done a lot with satellites, so I'm not as versed in it. But I know with linear transponders, it's much trickier, because depending on the height of the satellite, it's either going to be a really long pass, and you'll be able to point towards it and not have to really shift. You don't have to do as much Azel type stuff. You can actually just stay on this horizontal plane. You don't have to shift up, and you don't have to count for Doppler quite as much, depending on the height or how far up in the atmosphere it is, or how far above Earth it is actually. So I'm not as versed with satellites, so I may not be saying the right things all the time when I'm talking about it. So there's going to be someone who's going to. I wish I had a little more information, because I haven't done much with satellites.
But the meteor scatter piece, so I'll end up with lots of questions. I don't want to monopolize.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Presentation.
No, this is exactly what it's for. It's not meant to be really a presentation. It's more meant to be a Q&A, like me to throw things out there, get some bites, and talk about it.
All
so
right.
what was your question about me?
It was just so is it? I mean, are you just using that to, to move your VHS? Is it causing like a hop or something with the VHF with your signal?
Yes.
Or your?
Yeah. So I mean, and that's the theory of it. Sometimes I question that, but I mean, that is a theory, because you literally get burst. So when you're using MSK 144 on 6 meters, you go to the frequency. I think it's like 50.200 something. I have to look it up. I haven't done it in a while. I could look it up then. You go to the frequency, you jump on, and I basically just point west. And typically, I believe the first turn, most of the East Coast will go on the first turn. Then the second turn, it's much like at a FT8. So it's just a different digital mode, but it's much faster. And you have these bursts. And so what happens is, most of the East Coast go on the first turn, and then the out west will go on the second turn. And that's kind of how it gets coordinated. So like, who's calling on one side and who's receiving on the other, and vice versa, who's calling. So you don't have me trying to call Missouri, and I'm on the wrong turn, and the people that are really listening to me are going to be the Northeast. Which, hey, if I want to get a Vermont call, then that's what you want to do, and it's not like you can't call on that turn. But moving past that, so basically, I just point out west, and you're literally, instead of hearing like FT8, where you hear the tones the whole way through, you'll be listening, and all you hear is just just white noise, just static. It's not. I'll get into the noise floor too, differences between HF and VHF, but you just hear white noise. You just hear just like, it's usually like a slight hissing on VHF and above, and all of a sudden you just get this burst, and right, and that's all you hear. But you get a decode, and you'll see a 0 call, or you'll see a 9 call, and there you go. It's the meteor scatter. So the theory is that these meteors are coming in, they're disintegrating into the atmosphere, and that's giving you a bounce point, basically. I forget what layer that is.
There's a program that you run. I've made a few MSK 144 contacts, and there's a program, and I can't remember. K3RLW does that, and so Don NT3U's done a few. But there's a program that will actually show a graphical representation of the meteors that's coming down, because you need meteors before you can make MSK 144 contact.
Right.
Yep.
And it is weird, and I think it's a minute-long transmission.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where you'll get a burst. Okay, so the differences between MSK 144 and FT8 another difference, I should say rather, is that so FT8 and like JT65, you have to wait to the end of the turn before you get the decode, right? So you listen to the whole turn, and then all of a sudden you get all these decodes. You'll get decodes in the middle of the turns. Like you'll be, you'll be maybe a quarter way through the turn, you get a couple bursts, and you'll get decodes. And it might be one person that you just constantly get decodes because of these bursts. You get like, K0 TPP, which is he's pretty well known, and if you point out west, he's got a heck of a setup on 6 meters for meteor scatter, and he will give you the contact. It's very exciting, and you'll see his call a couple times, and it'll decode multiple times throughout the turn, and you'll get other decodes as well. So it happens in bursts throughout the entire turn. You'll get like sometimes when it's busy, you get like 4 or 5 different decodes. Sometimes if it's not a good day, you might get one, and you might only get 1 or 2 the entire morning. For MSK 144, you typically get on in the morning time. That's when most of the activity is. I don't know if there's some sort of scientific explanation that maybe we get more meteors in the morning overnight. I don't know, but there's definitely. I usually would get on around 7 o'clock in the morning, and just point west. And usually there's activity going to at least 9:30. But the height of it is typically around like 7:30, 7:45, sometimes 8 o'clock.
Huh.
These are the tools that I use, and I'm going to. Can you enable screen sharing, Don?
I'll be right back.
Okay. So let's change this here. All right. So this is ping jockey, and I typically use this for meteor scatter. And you can see Larry right there at K0 TPP. He's in Missouri, and he'll let you know that he's on. And some people say, "Oh, I almost got the decode," or we don't. It's kind of like a chat client on the web that's typically used for meteor scatter. Sometimes people use it for FT8 contacts as well, but typically it's used for meteor scatter. And this is where you can find them on. And I'll post all these links in Groups.io, so everybody has all of these tools I'm about to show you. So this is a kind of a neat tool. You can see, like they just say, "Hey, I'm still trying." You're chatting back and forth. 50.260 is the MSK, and there is like this. This guy's just letting know, "Hey, I'm on here. I'm calling CQ." Trying. Some people try and point towards them. I usually just point out west, honestly, or I'll point into the northeast. Every once in a while, there'll be somebody from the south that jumps on too. It's not super busy, MSK 144 meteor scatter, but we get some people on there, especially during the height of 6 meter season. More people tend to jump on. This is another tool that I use here, DX Maps. And you can use it for other bands other than just 6 meters, but it's very popular for 6 meters. But as you can see, you can use it for, you can select your locations. Of course, we have North America selected here. You got 6 meters. You got, 2 meters. You got 432, 222, and up. And then you can also check VH or HF too. So it'll give you HF propagation. What it does, just basically, is the people that report to the PSK reporter, things like that, their contacts will show up here. So if you have a confirmed contact that's up on PSK reporter, they kind of crunch this in and we'll show you what's happening with propagation. You can zoom out here. You can see there's nothing much going on with 6 meters right now, is there? Earlier today, Europe was lit up, and you can see all kinds of contacts happening. But this is a neat one. And another thing I like about this too is if you look down here at this hyperlink, you can actually sign up for email alerts. So whereas I have, I want to make sure I get the right password in there. Oh, save it as ENT unless I typed that wrong earlier. Oh, come on. Stop it with the ENT. Just reset my password now. I guess maybe I didn't. I wanted to show you guys this.
What is over here?
Well, I'm not going to hold this up. Right, here we go. Yeah, I don't know why. I'm gonna have to reset it. Anyways, you can sign up for email alerts. So basically, for any which band that you want on here, it'll set up alerts for 6 meters, 432, 2 meters. So when there's propagation and people are actually making contacts, it'll email you and then you can jump on. Because VHF UHF propagation pops up and then shuts down. It's fast, and sometimes it'll do that throughout the entire day. Sometimes I only do it for 10 minutes. Might do it for 2 minutes. So it's not like HF where you have like a good solar flux index or something like that, and all of a sudden propagation's hot for almost the entire day, which is typically what happens during our when we're in the upbeat of the solar cycle. VHF is not like that. It's especially 6 meters or especially 2 meters. In my experience, it'll pop up. You got to jump on. You might have 10 minutes to go in there, make the contacts so you can make. If you get an opening, and then it's shut down. And it's very exciting because it's kind of like you didn't have this propagation, for the longest time, and all of a sudden it's like boom, your 2 meters has opened up, the whole way out into Missouri or something like that. You're like, wow, I need to jump on and make some contacts. This is also another really cool link that I like. It gives you VHF UHF beacons, and not all of them are completely up to date, but typically most of them are. And you can see they listed by band here, so you can see the frequency. We got 2 meter frequencies here. And as you get further down here, they give you the 222 beacons, and then down here they give you the 432 beacons. The nice thing is, beacons are really helpful when you're operating on 2 meters or on VHF UHF, because whereas you have these maps here and you can see who's making contacts and stuff like that, you may want to test out your equipment. Let's say you just made some improvements on your equipment, you made some repairs, put some new feed line, you fixed the coaxial cable connection, you replaced a preamp or something, who knows, or you put up a new antenna. You want to test how well can you hear these beacons on these frequencies. So that's exactly what you want to do. Is you want to go to these beacons. A lot of these are clubs VHF clubs that have put up a beacon just for that reason. Keystone, the Keystone VHF club that I belong to, we have some beacons up there. The Pack Rats, which are outside of Philadelphia, big weak signal group that does all VHF UHF. They've got a lot of really good beacons up, and there's a couple that I use down in Virginia that are helpful because they're usually fairly quiet for the most part. But when propagation is up, I know I can turn towards them and I can say, wow, I'm actually hearing this beacon at like S5 right now, or S6. And it's a really good indicator of what's going on because it's the constant. It's almost like it is a constant. It's almost like kind of like a barometer, and it's a real-time barometer. It's a beacon that's always at a certain pointing in a certain direction or using the same antenna, the same tower. So it's the constant. And it's a good way to judge your propagation based upon that. One thing I wanted to talk about too that's different with VHF UHF is the noise floor. So where you'll find like noise floors, especially as you get lower in the lower frequencies in HF, especially like 40 meters and 80 meters, it can get pretty nasty, especially 80 meters. Sometimes a noise floor can get up to like S6 and S7 just from atmospheric noises. You don't really have that on VHF, UHF. I typically find that, especially for 2 meters and above, it's quiet. You turn it on and your S meter might be at like S1 or S2, but the white noise is not nearly as harsh on your ears. It's very somber, very quiet. So you might hear a station that's at S1 or S2, and you might hear them loudly, but your S meter is not really getting pushed all that much, and that doesn't typically happen on HF. And so that's why you'll always want to make sure that you use the best feed line and the shortest run you possibly can on VHF, UHF, because that signal might only be at S2 and you can hear it really, really well. If you compromise yourself with, RG8X or something like that on VHF sideband, you're probably gonna run yourself out of the possibility of listening to that station, or be able to make a contact with that station, because you can't hear them, or your run is too long. You have a 150-foot run, which is typically, you don't want to do that on anything 2 meters and above, because you have significant line attenuation. So that's why I always tell people, you may do what you can afford, of course, to get yourself on the air. But if you can wait another month because you can get like some better feed line, wait another month. It's worth it. It's well worth it. Feed line is very relevant. It's a lot more relevant in VHF, UHF than it is in HF. HF, you could throw 8X out there, you could be fine. VHF, I wouldn't suggest it. 2 meters and above, I wouldn't. Well, 2 meters, I wouldn't use anything less than LMR 400. 6 meters, you can get away with. You can go away with like a 213 or something like that if you wanted to, but maybe even 8X. But and 432, anything 70 centimeters and above, you definitely want to use. You can use LMR 400. The better solution is probably going to be LMR 600, and depending on the run too. Like I have a 432 beam, and I use LMR 600 flex, and that has been a big step up from what I was using before. I started out, and it's okay to start out like this, but I started out with military mass poles and some hand-me-down beams, and I think I had the RG, was it 213 on it, and it worked. I had it 6 meters and 432 up there, and it worked. But man, what a big difference once I got the better feed line on, and of course upgraded my antennas, which really weren't. They were just newer antennas of what I really had, or added a couple more elements. So yeah, it gave me a little more gain, but honestly, I really do think the feed line was the biggest contributor, and also height too. So, which brings me to my next thing that I wanted to throw out here, and I'll stop because I know I'm talking a lot, and we'll take a break and you guys can ask questions. There is this stuff right here. And, okay, this is basically, can you guys see that okay?
Yeah.
You can? Okay, good. So these are military mass poles, and here's an entire kit for $209. Now, I know that sounds like, oh, wow, it's a lot for a military mass pole kit, but it's got everything that you need, and it's a really robust setup, and will get your antenna, up in the air 30, 35 feet, which is really where you want to be for sporadic E. Sporadic E, you want to have your beam up about 35 feet, 30 feet, and you will be singing. It's the, what is that? I think it's 2 wavelengths on 6 meters. So what this is that it's military mass poles. They're typically fiberglass or aluminum. This one happens to be aluminum. I suggest the aluminum, by the way. because the fiberglass will break down in the weather over time. I had mine out for, I think, about a year and a half, and it eventually came down because fiberglass broke down and got brittle and broke apart, and down came my antennas and they got bent. But I bent them back and they worked. But it's got this really nice center section here. Let me get a better picture of it. There you go. There's a top piece. And so basically, these military mast poles go down through the middle of it and through the ends and create a nice wide base tripod that sits about like 4.5 feet up in the air, which is a really nice base and does not move anywhere. And you can see that this middle section here goes right in the middle to kind of suspend the very base of it. It comes with a bag, comes with stakes, comes with the guy rings here, so you can put the guy rings, in the, a couple sections up and guy it off, which is what I did as well. I had a 3-element M² 6-meter beam up there, and I had a hand-me-down 432 beam that I think was about 18 elements, and this held it just fine. And I had a Zenith, like a TV rotator. I still have that rotator, and that was my first VHF UHF setup. I mean, of course, I have my 2-meter beams up above too. I'm not leaving those out, but those were put up in 2013, so they were kind of a constant for me. And you can see how it's guyed here. I think they got like a vertical HF antenna, I think, on top of there at the moment. You can see how it works, and it's a really nice setup. For $209, that's a heck of a deal. I think it's, it gives you 8 sections, six mast legs, which is a lot. You can also piece this together yourself too. You can go to Coleman's, which is a military surplus store, and you can piece all this stuff together too. If you don't want to get all of this stuff, you can be a little more thrifty about it. And that's how I got my stuff. I went to Coleman's. There's a Coleman's up north of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I'm sure there's probably going to be one down in Maryland somewhere, but that's where I went. Let me, I guess let me stop here and take any questions that anybody has on anything that we talked about or anything I haven't talked about that you want to talk about.
I'm eating my dinner.
Sorry.
I had to mute. You don't want to watch me eat. I was looking at the LMR 600. The Times Microwave has it. A couple folks make it, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, there's another. While we're all on that subject, let me go back to sharing my screen here. So this is I use, other than, so I have LMR 600 for my my 432 beam, but for the rest of my antennas, I use an equivalent of LMR for my 400 stuff, and it's called Shireen. Now I looked at the prices, and boy, COVID has not been easy on us when it comes to prices for coax. But this is Shireen. They're located outside of, I think, Gaithersburg, Maryland, or maybe it's Rockville, Maryland, one of the two. And this is stuff that I got. And I bought like an Ultraflex. It's a RFC 400 Ultraflex. I bought a spool of 500 foot, and I run that on all of my beams, on my my HF beam, my 2-meter beam, and my 6-meter beam. It was a lot cheaper back when I bought it. When I bought it, it was $375. It's now $646. So
there's a copper shortage about us, so
yeah, I know. I kind of figured. So yeah, so this is a nice alternative. I don't know what the price of LMR 400 Ultraflex is now.
So what about like the old standard RG8U or whatever?
I would do that on 6 meters, but nothing higher than that.
Okay.
Yep. Because let's go to an antenna.
I mean, I use it for my 2-meter repeater stuff, which is, whatever.
Right. And the difference with that is that, so 2-meter repeater stuff, your 2-meter repeater is local. So
Right.
it's going to be within 20 miles. You're going to have a fair amount of good omnidirectional gain with your vertical omni antenna, and quite frankly, you probably have a repeater that's in a really good spot that can hear really well.
Right.
So you have all of those conditions. I use 8x for my vertical omni for my repeater stuff.
Right.
But for sideband, you don't want to do that for that same reason. Is that you might be, whereas someone right beside, someone in your same neighborhood with the same setup, except for their coax, might be, LMR 400, and they're going to be able to hear that station in Vermont or that station in Connecticut, and you might not be able to pick them out, because your attenuated receive is going to be a couple S units less than what they're hearing.
Huh.
So look at this.
And then, fortunately, in my situation, my run to my radio room is pretty short. So,
well, that's great.
Yeah.
That's perfect. That's ultimately what you want to have. I mean, I have no preamps on the mast, which is a popular thing. We can talk about preamps if you want. And I'm running barefoot, so I'm running 100 watts through the feed line straight to my beams. So you can see LMR here on 2 meters for every, 100 feet, I believe it is. They give you a feet foot. Yeah, attenuation per 100 feet is only it's only a 1.5 dB of loss, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we go to 8x, it's 4.7. So it's some significant loss. That's why I don't suggest you use it. I mean, for repeater work, no problem. Sideband stuff, I mean, not unless your run is like, 30 foot or something like that, like your transmitter is right underneath it. Even then, I wouldn't even want to do it.
So where does RG8 fall into this then?
8 is like your 213, I believe. So it's double the loss,
right,
of LMR 400.
That's enough. Huh.
Yeah, it is. And so when you're talking, I mean, you can do it, but in another 2 years when you can afford the, I don't say when you can afford it, but another, for a permanent solution, I would rather wait and put good coax up, because I don't want to go 40 foot up a tower and replace coax again in another 2 years or a year or so. I'd rather just put it up there and keep it there. But it's up to everybody's different. So everybody has a different approach to things. Me personally, I wouldn't want to do it. I would rather wait, spend the money on 400. But everybody's situation's different. You can see as you get up in high in frequency, you see on 432, you can see the difference between 213.
Wow,
and even LMR 400 is a little bit high. So that's why I put LMR 600 on my 432 beam, because it gives you about the same loss per 100 feet. And I have 80 foot of 600 going out to my beam, because I didn't feel like swapping all of my antennas. I have my 2 towers. One of them's right up beside my house. And that on the top of that one, I have my tri-band HF beam, and I have my 2 meter beam, right? But then on the second tower that I put up is out of my garage, which is like, a detached garage from my house. So I have to run it through my attic and kind of like sway it across the walkway, going to my tower and going up the tower. So right there is 80 foot of coax. And it's just, I was like, I didn't feel comfortable putting anything else other than 600. Most weak signal guys would have upgraded to hardline, but I didn't want to spend that much money either. Of course, LMR 600 is going to be really expensive now, I imagine. I mean, I bought it back in 2018 when I went to Hamvention, and I think I paid, I want to say it was like $2 a foot or something like that.
Wow. I'm looking up.
I can imagine what it's like now.
Well, DX Engineering has times microwave. It's $283 a foot.
Yeah. So maybe I paid. I think I paid $1.75 a foot for it.
Wow.
I'd be willing to bet. pretty
Then they
sure.
have then Times Microwave has an ultra version, and that's 354 a foot.
That's so the UltraFlex is what I got. So I didn't get the solid connector. If you're putting up a beam, you want to put up UltraFlex, because you're gonna have the wrap up by the rotator, and your rotator's twisting around, and it's just turning that coax constantly back and forth.
Especially in winter.
And the UltraFlex is going to put up with that long term. The solid connector will break, in a matter of years, versus the UltraFlex, which will hold up pretty well. So yeah, I bought the UltraFlex, and I believe that was something like $2 a foot or something like that.
Wow.
So for those who don't know either, is that there's also one other thing. I'm sorry. There's things called preamps, mass-mounted preamps. And what they do, they're very popular with the weak signal work. Now, I don't have them up yet. I know that's something I'm going to eventually upgrade. But what they do is they basically are filters, and they basically filter out, other adjacent signals, for that frequency range that you buy it for. And what that does is that lowers the noise floor even more. And so then that signal that was kind of right at the noise floor or wasn't very strong with all it's now is clear as day. And so those are very popular as well.
So a preamp doesn't magnify or amplify the signal?
Well, it does, and it does it by doing that. It lowers the noise floor. That's my understanding of it. That's the way I've always been taught. So what it does is
that sounds like a filter.
It is a filter. Yep. So they're really popular. You can get them where you can use your 100 watts. So Don, somebody got their?
I'm not sure. It's not me.
Oh, maybe it's Bob. That's a little. So mass mount preamps are really popular, and you can get them for barefoot operation. You can also get ones that you can tag on a sequencer onto it, so that if you're operating at high power, it'll basically bypass the preamp filter and not blow it away, and when you're transmitting. So it's kind of sequencers. How they work is basically when you transmit, the sequencer will take the preamp filter out of line, and then you'll be able to transmit straight to your antenna without damaging your preamp. And then as soon as you let go of the push to talk, it will switch your preamp back into line, and you'll be able to hear magically better.
now I'm understanding all that's a little confusing to me, Dad. The idea isn't terribly confusing, but when I started going out and looking at that stuff, it was over my head.
Yeah, I mean, so if you're operating barefoot, there are preamp mass-mounted preamps that you can transmit 100 watts right through it, and it won't damage it. So
there you go. Here's one example of it right here.
There you go.
Hey, wait, Steve, didn't you get that like 3 weeks ago?
What's that?
I guess it makes sense, Stephen, that you have that, because you have quite a bit of VHF equipment, VHF, UHF equipment.
Yeah. And Chris, did you have a question earlier? I'm sorry.
Oh, well, I mean, I was gonna just ask about the preamps, because I know that I remember seeing the pictures that Steve put up on Discord that he got his preamps.
Yeah, they make a big difference.
And so really, I mean, they are still kind of pricey, from what I understand.
They are
for one that run 100 watts. But even so, if you figure with if you're putting it together, I mean, obviously that's something that can be added later, I think. But
yes.
What about, like, there's a lot of antennas to choose from for sideband 2 meters. I mean, I'm looking at
right. So there was this one, and so that brings me to this point. Is that so? I know this antenna is not like a long-term solution, but I have bought it and I've used it portable, and it works well. It works really well. It's pretty wide banded, and the tuning was really good. And you can break it down and put it back in the box and store it away if you want. Put it up temporarily, and it's cheap, $60. I thought it was a really good solution, and gives you some decent gain too. And it's lightweight too, so you can put it up in a temporary mast or something like that for the contest, or for for some tropo openings when when the season's here. And there it is. And I think it's a great solution to get your foot in the door, instead of having to buy like a a $250, $300 beam that you got to have this big support system for, and all this other stuff. This would be a great solution to start out. I like it, and it works good for FM as well. I just gotta, let's see here. I don't know if it.
Would you consider posting that link on Discord, Dan?
Yeah. So I said in the beginning of the conversation, I'm going to post all these links on Discord and on Groups.io for everybody, so you have all of them. Because I went through some tools earlier.
That's awesome, Dan. That would be perfect.
Yeah, absolutely.
So aren't these? I guess they're vertically polarized. I thought they would be horizontal.
So what you got to do is turn it horizontal.
Right.
What you really want to what you really want to look at is what the frequency range is. So some VHF beams have a wide frequency. That's what I was just looking for, was what is the frequency range? Because I mean, honestly, yeah. So this is pretty wide banded. Look at this. So this goes from 144 to 148 megahertz, which covers the sideband portion of 2 meters, which is 144, and covers the repeater FM portion, which is up in 146 to 148. So there you go. This is really wide banded, and that's probably why I picked it, because I was like, oh, this is pretty versatile, and it's light, and it gives you 9 dB a gain. That's pretty nice. Or as you look at some of the other ones, like I was going to show you guys directive systems, which is my favorite. This is my favorite. Now, if you want something more permanent, this is something that you would probably want to consider. Let's look at their 2 meter beams. This one, for instance. So this one here, the frequency range is pretty wide too. I'll be dang. So this is a pretty. Let's look at this 12 element. I bet you it's select. Yeah. So this is going to be a lot tighter. So this is frequency range is between 144 megahertz and 146. So it goes right down to the beginning part. It can be tuned to the beginning part of the FM portion. And a lot of times with these things, the tuning is like it's something that you need to do at home, versus like this thing is already pre-tuned. This diamond antenna, it's got a little tuning. It's got a little tuning box up there. It's already pre-tuned. You don't have to do any tuning. The other beams, like this guy here, you do have to tune it. It's going. What kind of match is it? There's here somewhere. There's a match that you basically need to pull in and out and tune it with a tuner, and you can do that very cheaply with one of those little nano VNAs. I love those things. Those things are great. I say if you want to get into VHF stuff and you think about buying a beam eventually that you got to tune, get yourself a nano VNA. They go the whole way up to 1.2 gig or more now, and you can get that for under $100 versus buying one of those really expensive tuner or one of those really expensive antenna analyzers that are running like $800. That covers the Vhf UHF portion. So.
Oh, I think everybody has one of those but me.
There you go, Bob. Thank you. Oh yeah, I tell you, those things are great to have. And honestly, I watched the video that Josh from Ham Radio Crash Course put out on how to use it.
Oh, right.
Boy, that video was golden because it shows you exactly what to do. And I was like, oh, this thing makes sense now.
Yeah, I've been thinking about it. I just haven't gotten around to doing that yet. Oh, you got
absolutely. Another thing I want to show you guys, or ladies and gentlemen, is so I'm just going to put a link up to the grid Maidenhead grid square map. This is something you definitely want to keep a hold of, because all of your VHF UHF contacts, the exchange is your grid square. Typically, people don't, if it's quick contact, people aren't exchanging signal strengths. They're exchanging their grid. That's to let you know where exactly, how far you're making it, basically. So you want to have one of these handy, especially if you're not as familiar with the different grid sections. You got DM, DN, and EM. Typically, during an opening, you'll start to hear these exchanges, and you're like, wow. And you start hearing DN, and you're just like, wow, I'm actually hearing up into Wyoming and Montana, or you're getting the whole way out into California in the Ds. It's pretty exciting. So these things will take on a whole different meaning with you when you hang in a big opening on 6 meters. And then this is another link that I really like. And I'll post this one as well. I don't even want to try and pronounce that, but it's basically a plethora of VHF tools that you can use, some space weather, GPS satellite stuff. But I use this stuff. If I go to grids here, render, there we go. So now I can go to a certain part of the map and zoom in. Let's see if I can zoom into where my parents live down in Delaware. There we go. They live right off of Rehoboth Bay. And they're going to be, there we go, Shell's Landing. This is it.
And on stations TD, we're still in a 15-minute hold, waiting for a final go from the PI.
I think this is it right here. Oh, here it is. There is a gazebo right all along the bay that I usually operate at, and so I can put that cursor right there, and you can see that it'll tell you exactly what your 6-digit grid is. So that's FM 28 Kilo Papa. That's just a really nice tool to have if you're planning on going somewhere, or you want to figure out, like a specific spot down to the very granular zoom level. You can see exactly what the 6-digit grid that is. So that's a really nice tool. But there's other things on here that you can look at too. There's satellite information. You can track satellites. I've never used the satellite stuff. Again, I haven't really done a whole heck of a lot with satellites yet. I've made some FM satellite contacts, but have not done anything with the linear transponders, which is your sideband contacts. Which I really ought to do that since I have the 9700. Does anybody have any questions so far?
I got to jump, but thanks for the info, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I got pretty much everything I need.
And honestly, if there's anything you think about, or as you get into doing stuff that I can help you out with, man, just
sounds really cool, actually.
Yeah, just send me a Discord text or something like that, or message me. I'll be more than happy to help out with anything that I know. And if not, I have a lot of friends in the weak signal groups that I could also ask them as well. So we'll get you squared away either way.
Unless it's me and I'm doing on your coattails on the contest.
Well, then I'll help you out too, but I'll be after the contest.
That's all right. You seem to always find a way to stay on top. So
I don't know, man. This you could very well top. I mean, you almost got me last contest. So and you got some upgrades. So there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to either keep up or exceed me, man. Seriously.
I got the antenna. I just don't have the height and mount right now because it's still Armstrong rotor, and it's still only 8 feet off the ground. So it's still compromised. Unless I'm going south. If it's working,
can you put up something temporarily? for it?
Well, I wasn't going to, but I got some kind of bad news on the tower, so I might have to consider that seriously.
I don't know. So is the tower a no-go now?
Well, it's sitting about 25, 30 feet from me out there in my
Oh,
yard.
you have it. Oh, good. It's just a matter of getting it up and
But the guy that was supposed to be making the plate for it and going to make the tilt over mechanism for it, which he's done
Yeah.
before, he's super mechanical. Well, he runs the all the heating, steam, everything else for Naval Academy, the hospital, like 6 different organizations. He's got 1,500 people work for him. So he's a master plumber, master electrician, master everything.
so
And
yeah,
like,
he's basically a MacGyver.
big time, and he's licensed
Yeah.
with every one of them. So he
Yeah.
really knows his stuff. But he was gonna help me with it, huh? Oh, it's a launch update. But out of the clear blue, he said, "Oh, I forgot all about you. Oh, well, I got this going on and that going on, and well, maybe I'll get to you." So he's kind of freaked out a little bit on me. So I'm not sure what's going on.
You know, yeah, there's other avenues too. You know, get a good machine shop and stuff like that. Maybe check something like that out. You know,
I was watching earlier. I've been in and out because I got about 4 things going on tonight, all simultaneously. So I checked into the 2-meter net, the mud-toes, and some other things.
So,
but I was watching earlier when you did that mast with that base to it.
That thing is fantastic.
Well, it looks like the same base that Gary just put up for his.
Yes, it is.
Secret.
Because Gary asked me, and I sent him that. I said, "Here, this is what you want."
And he hasn't told us a lot about it, but something about he's got a rope on a limb up above it to give it support. Because I was wondering how the hell he was putting that thing that far in the air without any guy wires. But I got to figure out what he's doing up top that it's allowing it to turn because he's still got a screw on.
I did that. So my antennas, when I were up on that thing and I had fiberglass, they came down twice. I said that they came down, but they actually came down twice. And the first time they came down, that rotator was a little heavy for it, and because the fiberglass was breaking down, it just too much for it. So when I put it back up, I put it up with aluminum poles, and then I did the exact same thing. I got some nylon dicron rope and wrapped it around the front of my 6-meter beam, right, the director, and I just draped it down. And so when I needed to go out, I just literally went out there and carouseled it around where I needed to get it, and it worked. I just didn't do it too much, you know what I mean? Because you don't want to stress it out, especially, now I have a rotator, I just rotate as much as I need to.
He said his is on a rotor that's still tied to the branch up there. So does he have some kind of swivel mount up on top or something?
I don't know. You have to ask him that.
Because according to him, he still, or what? It wasn't him; it was Scott telling little bits and pieces of the secret.
Yeah, I mean, Scott,
the rope was still attached.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's kind of cool to give it some extra support without guys.
Yeah, no, I had mine guide. Because I get winds that come whipping across my pasture. I mean, if you look back there, that's nothing but pasture, and it's flat. And I'm up on an elevated plateau basically. There's hills all around us, and so that wind, there's nothing stopping it. It'll come through here. If there's gusts that are on AccuWeather that are measured for 15, 20 mile per hour gusts, they're usually about 30 mile per hour gusts here, or 20, 25. Yeah. So it's always about 10 miles per hour over.
So
whatever.
So you have the rotor up top.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't have it down below. No.
This is ground.
Oh, that would be a heck of an idea though, because I mean the posts literally go straight through it, and you could rotate it from the bottom. You really could. You would just have to figure out how to base it, and then that would be it. You would just have to figure out how to make it a stationary base to be able to turn it. But that's completely plausible. I mean, really, that would work well.
I'm gonna have to give that some serious thought.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, honestly, Bob, it'd be worth it, for a temporary thing. But then you'd always have them then too, and then you could use that until you get your tower up. I'd do it in a heartbeat.
I got I got a friend of mine's giving me he built a homebrew 6-element 6-meter Yagi. It's only like 12-foot boom, so I don't think it's optimized because it should be a longer boom than that. But he was going to give that to me, so I might have that. With that mount, would I be able to put a 6-meter in it and the 2-meter I've got this 12-element, which is 23-foot boom, on that safely?
It's probably you have to see what the weight is. It might be pushing it, but yeah, you probably could.
Look on your face is what I've had on mine. So
well, here's the thing. It would still work well. You may not be able to put it up for 30 feet. I wouldn't put it up 30 feet. I would put something beams of this size. I would probably put them up about 20 feet, and it would work probably just almost as well. But it would also be a lot more secure. You wouldn't mess up your gear. That would be my choice, because I've used my 3-element beam, my 3-element M², and it was only up like 17 feet, 20 feet. And I was making it to California and Washington, no problem. I had more problems with going making contacts to Europe than it caused to be, because I didn't have as much gain on the 3-element beam. When you have an opening on 6 meters, sporadic E opening, you don't need to be that high on 6 meters. Now the 2-meter beam, that's where you may compromise a little bit more if it's only up 20 feet. So it's up to it's going to be to your discretion. It's like, how dangerously do you want to live? I mean, I would, if I wanted to use those as permanent antennas, I'd be scared about putting up something that's substantial up any higher. Although you could always take it down in a hasty change if we have high winds. So it's kind of up to your discretion. Actually, I wanted to talk about contesting. We didn't talk about was the differences between HF contesting and VHF contesting. One difference that sticks out the most, well, two things basically, but the first thing is that HF contesting, you typically have a mode-centric contest. So you have a CQ Worldwide RIDI, or CQ Worldwide CW, or CQ Worldwide sideband. Same with ARL contests. Whereas VHF contests are multi-mode and multi-band, of course, but they're most importantly multi-mode. You can make contacts on CW, you can make contacts on FT8, you can make contacts on sideband, you could do meteor scatter. I mean, they're all over the place. So you really need to keep that in mind when you're operating, because when conditions are starting to get a little flaky, people go to CW, people go to FT8. You're not going to have as many people on sideband or other modes that may not make it through the poor conditions. And also, what you want to consider too is that you really do want to try to have a beam up, because especially for 2 meters and above, because you want some gain, you want to be able to do the best you can, and part of that, your multipliers are the grid squares. So if you're picking up the same grid square, you're not going to increase your score. You want to increase your score by broadening your spectrum of grid squares, and you only do that by gain and height. So whereas you can probably get up on 2 meters on the digital portion with that $60 antenna and get that thing up about 40 feet, 30 feet, you'll be singing. You'll do well. You really will. You also that brings me to the next point, is that you never want to stand still during a VHF contest, because it gets bland. You're hearing the same people, and things shift. Propagation shifts really quickly. You can be on 6 meters in the middle of an opening, especially this coming up June contest, and it's opened up to Missouri, right? And literally 10 minutes later, you'll be hearing California and Washington, and you'll be making contacts with them. So you need to move your beam around. You need to watch the maps, see where propagation is changing, and make sure that you're pointing that direction, because you'll miss out quickly. It's also helpful too when you're contesting with a group like ours, is because I'll be posting, hey, look, I got this contact, or Bob posting, I got this contact, and we all know, or Don's done it too. You kind of, hey, I got these guys over here, and everybody shifts over towards that direction. You always want to be kind of ADD in a way. It really is that way. But because of that, it makes it interesting.
So
If you're
one of the things I think some of us have competed, but one of the things contest does is if you want to make those longer distance 2-meter contacts, the people are out during contest weekend.
They are. They really are.
I mean, I was surprised to get Ohio, right? Or I forget how far out I was, but it was farther away than I would have expected to make a 2-meter
right.
contact.
And this is on a band that, unfortunately, a lot of people don't know, that aren't really kind of exposed to the other parts of it other than FM repeaters, And so FM repeater, you think, oh, 2 meters, this is meant for like a 60-mile at most contact or a 30-mile at most contact. No, it's not. It can go much further, and it's much more exciting. So you definitely want to keep it. Satellites, exactly. I mean, honestly, 2 meters, 2 meters and 432 is used in EME all the time. So I mean, people are going the whole way up to the moon and bouncing their signal off the moon and coming back down down to Earth on that.
Crazy suckers.
Quick, which brings up to a point where you were talking out there. One thing that frustrates me, and even like on the net, like the Bucktoes are in the net right now, and they're at the bottom of the Potomac, so they're south of me. So I've got 2 major directions, kind of south of me, and of course northeast. Which, how do you run that, doing stuff like that, and then picking up the occasional, westerly stuff, like if you do pick up Ohio or whatever, and then how do you do that without either destroying the rotor, or do you have multiple antennas up to deal with it? What's the way to do it? I really want 2 of my antennas that are sitting there pointing opposite directions, because if I did south and northeast, I'd be to have it.
So people do that. They will set up like intense VHF ops that are doing this. They will set up masts they'll have like, I forget what there's a German contesting station on VHF. They got that crazy stuff. It's nuts. I love it though. So they'll have like a beam pointed, in this direction. They'll also have one going this direction and one going this direction, right? So they're already pointed at you right here, and all of a sudden they know that there's a contact, 300 miles this way, and they'll basically just they'll have an antenna switch and go to this one, and then switch back and forth, and they'll have like switches to go to each one of those, which is nuts. But here's the thing: I have been on my 2-meter beam, and I've been pointed down. Maybe down in Virginia, or down into Maryland somewhere, and I'm like K1RZ. He's a very big time contester, and he's down in Maryland, and I've made contacts with him, and then I've actually made contacts off the back of my beam. So you can still do off the back of the beam in VHF. I've done it. It gets a little tougher as you get up in the higher frequencies, but 2 meters is definitely doable. So there's always that option too.
I've done a lot of that with the 6-meter Moxon.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. And that brings another.
If I can ever get this Cushcraft 11 element that I've got that's not working well, it doesn't have much gain to it. If I can ever get it working well, is it worth trying to put 2-meter up on a mast?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, but then you got to think, if you ever decide to put up, mass mount preamps, you definitely want to have one on each. You don't want to have one that's more deaf than the other. So there's definitely, you got an extra run. You got to have a nice switch too. You don't want to put some cheap, switch there. And you're still going to have a little bit of loss in the switch too. So everything, is to be considered, but I mean, I think it's a great idea.
I got alpha delta switches, so they're supposed to be pretty nice. And then
that's what I use too.
And I've not considered this point putting preamps up on the mast, so I've kind of precluded that in there just due to cost for me, because I'm just trying to get this somehow up in the air and get it functional, which is more important than trying to get optimal.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's also like
compromise.
There's always compromise, no matter what. It's just the name of the game is trying to minimize that compromise as best as you can. That's always the thing. And with VHF, there's there is definitely more VHF and UHF, the higher bands, there's much more compromise than there is on HF. There's a lot more things to consider, and if you really get into it, like if anybody really gets into it and they're interested in going to a VHF conference. I mean, as COVID dies down and we get back to normal, I used to go to the VHF conferences all the time with the pack rats, and it was a great way for me to learn and things to open up and see what these guys are doing. These guys are very technical, and they'll do like automation through Raspberry Pis with all of these and they make their own preamps. They make a lot of their own gear, because once you get above 432, I mean, it's not like ICOM's making a lot of stuff for that, and these big manufacturers are not making a lot of stuff for that. So you have to learn how to start making it and putting these kits together, and maybe bartering during these conferences for the electrical engineers that could do this stuff. So once it gets outside of your skill set. So conferences are a great thing to not only learn about how to improve your station and other ideas and equipment, but it's also informative as far as things that are outside of your skill set that maybe you might actually be in your skill set that you didn't realize, or something that you didn't do before, something that you're willing to try. I mean, that's also a part of ham radio is experimentation. So I love them. So if anybody's interested in those, I can definitely send you information once that starts getting up and rolling again. The pack rats, they have theirs outside of Philadelphia, and it's usually a 2-day thing. They have a nice raffle at the end. You have a sit down meal, and they raffle off stuff. I missed an Arrow antenna by one draw. The guy before me got it. And then he picks it up and he says, "I don't even know what this is." And I'm like, "Oh man."
Oh God.
So going back to the contesting thing, and I'll wrap this up. You really want to consider moving directions. I usually move in increments of 15 degrees typically. So if I'm calling and I'm looking for more context, if I'm not seeing anything on the map and I want to do some searching and pouncing, which you do a lot when you're VHF contesting, you don't necessarily call all the time, is I'll move in increments of 15 degrees. Another thing you want to get in the habit of, and this is what really gets you points, and I dare I say this in Bob's presence, but what will really get you points once you get going on it is you want to be able to run the bands. And so with people like ops like K1RZ, W3LL, some of these other big contesters, what you do is you start out on 6 meters or 2 meters, right? And you make the contact with them, and they say, "Do you have any other bands?" You better say yes if you do, and get used to going up and down the bands as fast as you can. You get better at it as you go. But what they do is they basically say, "Okay, let's meet on 6 meters. Pick the frequency." You say, "Okay, 50.155. I'll meet you there. Give or take 3 kilohertz." You go down there, you make the contact, and they say, "Okay, what's next?" You say, "Okay, 430. I got 432," and you name a frequency, and you go up and down the bands. But you want to make sure you point it at them if you got beams, of course, already. So as soon as someone says they want to run the bands with me, I make sure both of my towers are pointed in their direction, because especially with 432, you're talking about an ultra sharp, beam width that maybe I'm just guessing off the top of my head, maybe 5 degrees or something like that. Because if you literally go about 7 degrees off of that station, you're not hearing them at all. If you go on them, all of a sudden you're hearing them like 10 over S9. That's how 432 works. It's wonderful, but it can also be kind of hair raising, because maybe their oscillators aren't adjusted very well. So whereas you say, "I'll meet you at 432.125," you're on dot 125, but they're actually on dot they're up a few enough. They're up enough that you can't even hear them. So you may have to dial around sometimes because of the calibration. Their receivers might not be recalibrated well, and you'll find that with older radios too. So if they're whereas a 735 or 736, I think it's a Yaesu, is a great radio. It's a great VHF UHF all mode. It's an older radio, and so their receivers are going to drift and it will be off a little bit versus the.
I could definitely see that in the contest. I've never seen so many waterfalls that just sort of come down at a funky curve. I must have my
Yeah, and you
camera
get to
off.
visually see it when it's FT8. Exactly. That's why the 9700 has the GPS port, and why you get that. I got the Leo Bodner injection board that you just basically throws the 28 megahertz signal, GPS discipline oscillator signal into there to keep my receiver calibrated, so I don't drift like that when I'm on, especially when you're on digital, because digital you're talking about, not only are you talking about 432, which is pretty wide banded. I mean it's a lot. It's much more bandwidth than you would have down on 80 meters and things like that. But now you're talking about a little sliver of a signal that could be going like this if your oscillator's all messed up, and so that's why that's nice to have. But not all the radios that are on the air have that. I mean, my TS2000 drifted like crazy.
They're
But-
they're going to launch.
I've got an older 746 Pro, and so
Yeah.
I'm 2 and 6, and I can't go any higher right now. I don't have anything for anything better than 2. So if they
Yeah.
ask me to run the bands, I can run 2, but that's it.
Right, exactly. So and 432, the multipliers, the contacts are worth more. So the multipliers mean even more up there, which is probably the only way I could stay ahead of you the last contest.
I have a radio here, but I haven't put it on the air. I got to work with it. I've got a 726R, an oldie, but it
Yeah,
has the
726. That's what it was.
Yeah, I've got the one, and it has the 2, 6, and 432 modules in it. So
Nice.
that might be the way.
Those are nice radios. Those are nice radios. There was a 726. Yeah, the 726 I think was like 10 watts, and I think like the 736.
Almost.
Yeah, and I think the 736 may have been like 25 watts or something like that, or 35 watts. I can't remember.
36 supposed to have a better receiver too.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, they're sought after. Those things go for a pretty penny, especially now that the 9700 is like out of stock all the time.
And I don't have a waterfall, which for some of the people that are using waterfall, imagine doing this without a waterfall. It's like you put both your hands behind your back, and I'm still working on it.
So that was another thing I was going to say too, is that when we were talking about media scatter before, everybody was talking about Bob using a specific program. You also use WSJTX for MSK 144, and that's what I use. But I think Bob, what program do you use for media scatter?
I'm using MSK 144 on WSJTX.
Oh, you are? Oh, okay. Someone would mention that it sounded like you were possibly using another program. So I was like, well, I'd never heard of it. That'd be interesting to hear another.
I'm doing that, and I'm tinkering now with Q65. Made a couple contacts. I've made contacts 2, 6, and I've done 10 meter, believe it or not.
I haven't messed with Q65 yet. Very good. What else do I want to mention?
I don't have talk on the radio, but on the computer I do.
Nice. I think it's pretty much it that I wanted to cover. And sorry I was talking a lot, but I wanted to really cover a lot of stuff. And I hope. Does anybody else have any other questions?
I want to listen to it again because I missed bits and pieces of it.
Again, any interest that anybody has, feel free to either message me directly, but probably better yet, just message me in the general chat and just make sure that that you tag my call and my user ID. Then because probably somebody else might be thinking about that question too. And no question is a dumb question, and people have multiple approaches to it. So whereas Bob might have one approach to it, I might have another one. Neither of them are wrong. So you might want to get multiple inputs and decide what you want to do.
I might not be wrong, but he's probably more right than me.
Well, I mean, I'm constantly wrong. What else I want to say? Oh, Bob, I did want to mention though, 432 is the only reason why I was able to pull ahead of you the last contest, and I literally did that specifically because I saw you gaining, and you were like on my tail. Like, and I think a couple of times you actually jumped ahead, and I was like, I need to do something about this. So I immediately just switched to 432 and started looking for contacts.
So what should I put? Should I put my 432 antenna on top of my 6 meter, 2 meter antenna?
Yes. Yes.
So that
The
should be
higher the
highest.
frequency, the higher the frequency, the higher you want to get that thing, because you want to be able to get through the mountainous and topographical challenges.
I've got
But
my
realize
direct,
though that realize the higher you go, the more attenuation you have in your line too. So that's why a better feed line is even better.
yeah, it's not going that high. Well, I have LMR 400 everywhere.
Good.
A lot of people
Yeah,
go,
4032, you should be okay.
a lot of people go hardline to get some height.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
And I have
it just gets too complicated because I don't think you can have on the same switch. I don't think you can have the the
it's not complicated. So you
2 meter
just need.
stuff. Like I couldn't have one piece of hard line from the outside to the inside and have both my
So you would just
VHF stuff on it.
you would just reduce it down to your LMR 400 going into your switch. That's what I had. That's what I have in my 432.
Is it? Do you also have HF running on that same piece of hard line?
No.
Yeah, that's
What?
what I'm saying.
So why would you have HF on the same piece of hard line going to your UHF?
You don't want to go into the mind of Don.
Okay.
No,
I would always keep a separate feed line for your 432 beam, if that's what you're getting at. So I would never mix the two.
Right now, I have a wire for each antenna coming into my basement. I know some of the guys just did the switches, and it's not worth talking about right now. I'm just too. I don't feel like taking my antennas down. I'm tired of taking antennas up and down for a while.
Right, because so you don't have as many feed lines going on. Is that what that is? Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I would like to have is reduce the number.
So what I would do, Don, if I was in your situation, my approach would be to group the HF antennas together onto one feed line with a switch, and not include anything above 6 meters, because it's two totally different beasts, and you don't want to mix those up. Hardline is way overkill for HF. And you don't want to mix them because of that reason. It doesn't make any sense for you to mix your HF antennas on that feed line.
That did answer my question, Dan. You can't do it, is basically what you just said.
I mean, you can.
I will say one thing. I have a lot more fun on VHF than I do HF even.
Yeah.
Personally.
I mean, I say I had a lot of fun and a lot of excitement with HF, and I probably still will during the next solar cycle. It's not to minimize that, but VHF is kind of like, it's almost like you're sifting for gold and you actually found gold, versus HF, you have a goldsmith stopping by like every Sunday. You know, it's just one of those things, like when you had the aha moments in it, I would say, and I'm not banging on HF at all, don't take this wrong, but I would say I work harder for my VHF long distance contacts than I do on my HF contacts. And I think that's what makes it sweeter. That's my personal opinion. And that's the way I've felt about it. It doesn't mean that everybody else feels like that, or that's the golden standard. But that's why I've always been interested in it. And
when I did my Florida contact, 785 miles, I worked 10 minutes and I had one intermediary. I had somebody, K04YC, Cornell helped me out, and as an intermediary in between. And it took 10 minutes to complete that one contact. But I will remember that one contact probably for the rest of my life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. So it is fun. And even if somebody in the group that's interested in it and doesn't get into it right away, it's always a good thing to keep in your back pocket to say, hey, you know what, I'd like to try that someday, because it's always there. Although it would be nice to get more people involved in it, though. Not to say that there's less people involved in it. Actually, I would say the VHF contests are getting more popular. And I'll say, you know, I've been making almost as many contacts in the VHF contest that I do in like my HF contest. Some of the guys that are batting like 1,000 Qs in the HF contest, I don't think you'll do that in the VHF contest. For me, where I'm batting like 300 Qs or so, I'm doing just about that in the VHF contest, and I have a barefoot station. I don't have anything outrageous compared to some of the other big stations on VHF. I have I would say a very middle of the road station. My 6-meter beam is at about 32 feet. My 432 is probably about like 40 feet, and my 2-meter beam is about 45 feet. And I run LMR 400 and 600 flex, and I'm barefoot into it. So that's kind of the middle of the road. I do typically the 3 operator class in the ARL VHF contest, but I always forget now that I have a 9700 that I transmit at 75 watts on 432, so that forces me into the low band, or to the low power single operator class, because it was at 3-band class you have to do 50 watts or less on 432. So that's one thing we really didn't get to talk about tonight, but I'll link all of the different classes in the VHF coming up VHF contests. I mean, there's roving is a big thing. If you decide you want to start roving sometime or chase a rover, nice thing is if you chase a rover and you follow them along, you usually get about 4 or 5 different multipliers out of a rover each day, because they go from one grid square to another. So multipliers, grid squares are the key to scoring well in a VHF contest and making sure you get up to the highest band that you possibly can when it's rocking.
And finding somebody that's comparable where you're at in the contest, I tell you what really keeps you on your toes, because Dave kept me on my toes and I kept him on his toes, and it did make it a lot more fun.
Oh, it does. It absolutely does. And honestly, I wouldn't have made nearly as many contacts. I think it's the most contacts I have ever made in a January contest, ever. I mean, you kept me hopping. It was fun though, but I was like, there's a couple times I was yelling at my screen because I was like, I know you can hear me. And that's the people that weren't answering me. I was like, I know you can hear me.
And how is Bob with his mediocre, really minimal station keeping up with me? What's he doing?
Hey, no, you were rocking it, man. Honestly, you're in a really good spot. And honestly, Bob, another thing too is that you have the 6-meter Moxon. And for anybody who's interested in making their own antenna, it's a little bit more of an exotic antenna, but there's plenty of information out there, and you can make it, and it works really well. It gives you directionality. It is like I guess it's kind of like it's the beam that's not the Yagi, but boy, it gives you some gain and gives you some directionality, and it is a choice for hilltoppers that are on 6 meters. They will take it.
Nice step up from a loop or a square too.
It really is. Yep. And it just look at Bob's squirt, and he'll tell you that's an testament of how well it does. It does a really good job. So if you don't want to go out and buy the 3-element M² beam that runs about $200, you can make a Moxon for about half the cost or less, and get it up in the air. It's lightweight, so you can easily rotate it with a small rotor or even just a rope.
It's about a 4-foot turning radius, so you can put it somewhere in limited space.
Yep. And I've seen people make them out of all kinds of things. They made them out with PVC and wire, and it's basically it looks like a rectangle, but what you have is like a folded reflector and a folded director. Well, the reflector is really the driven element, I believe. I think that's how it works. And you have a director, and they're folded, and it looks like a rectangle that rotates around. It's kind of neat looking. I am going to build one eventually.
It's technically equivalent to about a 2-element Yagi.
Yep, exactly. Yep. Anybody have any questions?
You definitely can work off the back and side of that thing a lot.
Yep. That's for sure. Anybody have any questions?
Blew my mind when I was working in Virginia, and then I was working at Pennsylvania station, and I hadn't turned it, and I'm like, what the hell just happened?
It is. It's not sharp at all. It's not super sharp, I should say. So you can do stuff on the back of the beam, and you can still get out there and still have some directionality too. Very forgiving as far as that's concerned. At least from what I hear, I've never actually operated one, but I am gonna build one day. I keep saying that. All right. Does anybody else have any other questions at all?
Hey guys, I
Hey, how you doing, Scott?
sorry I'm late. Dan, maybe you already covered it, and I'm not sure if this applies or not. With the latest version of the software, we're getting the direct interface with WSJT. One of the things that we'll do is highlight duplicates, and I don't know. I'm still an FT8 neophyte, and I don't know how clear it was to determine duplicates before. But with the VHF contest coming up right before field day, we should have it integrated into that. Anyway, dupes will now be read in your log. So as soon as you see the decode and you see it's red, you know, okay, I've worked that guy. I don't have to click on him.
So
that's awesome.
So
awesome.
maybe you had a way of doing that before, but this should make it a lot clearer.
Dan and I both have the same question. You're going to put it in the contest software?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yes.
That's huge because
you just made my summer.
So Scott,
I was going to ask you that, Scott, but I forgot to ask you.
I don't know if you can appreciate this, but one of the things that's really nasty about WSJTX and contesting is you do need to know dupes. And so you have to, maybe Dan knows how to do it, but I always have issues. I screw up my whole WJSTX log and its ability to see dupes and things that I've had before when I go to a contest. Because when you go to a contest, you want to, I don't know, I'm not going to use the right language here. You're going to delete your existing log file so that when you start the contest, you know that you have a fresh slate and that you're getting new contacts, or if you have a dupe. And so here's a case, Scott, where so far I'm still a fan of JT Alert, but for contest, it's pretty good to bypass all of that and to go directly into your software. That's going to be an awesome opportunity.
That is going to be huge. That's going to be very huge because
that's good to hear.
I wasn't even.
That was my impression, but like I say, I haven't done enough to really know how that worked. But
Scott,
now AC log will look at the exact mode. If it's only a dupe, like if it's FT8 and you've worked a guy on FT8, okay, it's a dupe. If he's FT4, it's not. Not so with the contesting. If it's digital, if you worked him on FT8, you can't. It'll mark him as red with FT4 and so forth, which I think is within the rules of most contests.
What's gonna be really cool, Scott?
Contest specific, yeah.
So I don't know the answer to that question, Scott, but I'm guessing if you can do it one way in AC log, you can configure it. Once you've got it worked out, you can configure it however it needs to be configured for the contest software.
Yeah, it's going good. I'm hoping to release, Chris, Kim and I are hoping to release AC log actually 7.0 in the next day or two, if nothing else comes to light with the beta testing. And then we're immediately turning our attention to field day and the VHF and WW Digi to get it integrated there. And I mean, it's the same code. So I think we're really close in those. And Chris and I have experimented a little bit as far as exchanging field day contacts and the VHF contacts, and it's all coming over seamlessly. So I think we're in really good shape to be able to do that.
Scott, where that's going to help me a lot is because I operate SO2R for VHF contests, because I'll have my 6 meter up maybe on FT8 and then I'm calling on 2 meters and vice versa. And so I was never able to maintain the the rig interface, between, whichever one I had on FT8. And so I'm thinking now, if this is correct, should be able to do that now without using JT Alert and not have to worry about rig interfacing. It's what I would have to do is I would have to type everything in.
No, you're no typing. And in fact, it's going to be your option. We've got it working both ways. You can set up a rig interface with WSJT if that's the way you want to do it, or you can let AC log have the rig and JT.
That's the biggest difference. That's going to be huge.
Yeah, when WSJT starts to transmit, it tells AC log to tell the rig to transmit, and it's working. I've been doing a bunch of beta testing. It seems to be working fine. So
I can't
Yeah.
wait. That's gonna be huge.
Yeah.
You know,
Coming
I
soon.
wasn't excited about the integration as much as maybe some others were, because I've got all I've got the screen real estate and everything is working. But for the contest,
Mhm.
it's going to be good. They're starting. Oh man, they started the countdown again, and now it stopped. So I'm excited to try that. The only problem is going to be if there's a rocket launch that weekend.
Hey, Don, I'm serious. That would be awful cool to be able to put some kind of transmitter in one of your rockets and
I
have
think I said that we do. It's not the kind where you're going to be able to hear Scott. The whole flight lasts from the time it's launched till the time it hits the ground. Usually isn't very long.
No, I understand. It's just going to be a blip, but for that blip to see if Dan could hear it up in PA and we could hear it in Bel Air. I mean,
Don, what would be really cool is if you put like a little APR beacon on there and have a beacon like every like 2 seconds, right?
yeah,
And so it would capture the height every time it would go up, as it would go up and then descend, the speed and everything.
Did they scrub this thing? I'm sorry, I'm doing what Bob was doing earlier. I'm not sure if they're launching this rocket tonight or
They
not.
just said it's scrubbed.
Did they?
High level winds, high upper level winds.
So Scott and Dan. So I can't talk intelligently. There's all manner of electronics to put in your rockets, and I have several of those. I cannot describe well the technology that they're using. There's all manner of uplinks, downlinks, barometric pressure readers. There's all different kinds of ways to do that. I have a altimeter. It's really a flight computer, I guess would be a better way to describe it, that does all kinds of things, and it does transmit on 70 centimeters. I actually have a little handheld 77 centimeter antenna that I can use to get the downlink, but the downlink goes to the antenna and then a Bluetooth connection to your computer. So right now it's like just starting out as a new ham. I haven't talked to enough people or gotten enough information yet to fully understand the intricacies of all of it. Doesn't mean I can't use it. It's like, I just need, right now the focus is getting it in the rocket, getting it configured right so that when you launch it, it does what it's supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
But anyhow,
I guess if Tom, if you're still listening, you could probably turn off the record at this point in time. I think we're kind of pretty much done with the VHF talk.